Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you didn't know, I'm a diagnosed narcissist. But before I say the things I'm going to say in this video, keep in mind that I am not a licensed professional. So with that out of the way, it's been taking a while to make this video, to be honest. I've had it like stirring in my mind, and it should have been something that I think should have been posted like already, basically. But I guess better late now than never. And, if you're picking up what I'm saying, I think it goes along with the topic of what you clicked for, basically. So I wanted to discuss apathy because I've been having a lot of thoughts about that. And I'm not going to lie, I've been feeling way more drained than usual for some reason. I mean, it's nothing out of the ordinary for me to basically feel like shit every single day, feel fucking horrible, and just be at, absolute disgust with everything and the world and people, myself, and, just this abomination of an existence that has a pathetic excuse to be here for some reason. But, yeah, because even one of my friends have noticed that I'm typically more emotional than usual. But, underneath all of it, I really just don't care. That's why I wanted to talk about apathy and the contradictory feelings that come across with having apathy as a narcissist. And I think it makes a whole lot of sense because if you've seen a lot of my videos, I basically talk about my lack of self identity, my, terrible relationship with myself, which is why I have to compensate with basically a narcissistic persona, and that's why I have narcissistic personality disorder because I truly do not actually like myself. But despite those contradictory feelings, there's consciousness for some reason and an awareness of, I don't know, your being, despite how I would argue that I don't really have a being and whatnot. I've been questioning a lot about whether or not the unconscious actually exists. I've been doing that for the longest time, to be honest. I mean, I even have a video quite some time ago where I talk about Carl Jung's, conception of the shadow. So if you haven't seen that, feel free to check that out and share some thoughts if you think it's interesting or whatever. But anyway, yeah, I think for a lot of my life, I've just felt extremely apathetic. I've never really cared about, anything, despite having like the fragility of my ego that I'm trying to compensate with, a false sense of confidence, arrogance, and, yeah, whatever you want to call it, just narcissism, basically. But I am nothing, truly. I see life, I see the world, and if I'm not hating on it, I just feel absolutely nothing. Because sometimes feeling nothing is way better than, being terrible. A lot of my earliest experiences in life involved a lot of neglect and dismissing. So, I don't know, it's really colored my perception of life because oftentimes I think it's like I was only granted to ever feel like negative emotions. But then again, what happens if you experience too much negativity? I am diagnosed with depression, by the way. I have major depressive disorder. You kind of just like blank out. So, despite being pretty apathetic, I've noticed one thing about myself that doesn't really make any sense, but I've been trying to make sense of it at least. And I perhaps have a demonstration as to how I'm gonna, like rationalize that and whatnot in my exercise of thought as I make this video. But here's what I've noticed. Yeah, despite being like more emotional than usual, and friends have picked up on it, I, yeah, truly feel nothing underneath all of it. And I'm still questioning whether or not the anger or the nothingness makes more sense of me because, you know, when you struggle with a clusterb disorder, if it's not just, frustration and, like complete like irritation over like everything and anything, then, it's just a sense of like blank and, emptiness. And I might even say to a certain extent, I feel dead. Maybe not even to a certain extent. I just feel dead all the time if I don't feel absolutely awful or, absolutely numb. So it's created this like confusing sort of like effect that I've been experiencing more so these past few days. I think I've felt this way my entire life, but I don't know, for some reason these past few days I've like really felt it. That's why this video has been like so delayed because maybe in a sense I feel more depressed than usual, but I'm glad I just, finally, decided to hit record and here I am basically talking about it. I've noticed that like the angrier I feel, the more apathetic I feel, which doesn't really make sense, I think, when you like consider about it, because apathy, I guess you can say, is synonymous with being like numb or, nothingness and all that kind of stuff. So, like, where does all of this anger come from? And I started thinking back towards like my life and like my earliest memories and like stuff like that. And I guess this actually makes sense. And I guess this explains like my poor object constancy with like life, people, and the world. Because, you know, we've all had moments like this, I think, but I think it's like typically more so common as a narcissist or maybe somebody with like a cluster B disorder. When you reach the peak where something is just too much of a hassle or too much of like a frustration, I've noticed that like, yes, my apathy is extremely angry despite still being like apathetic. Because imagine when somebody says fuck this or fuck that or fuck you, all that kind of stuff. It's, an expression of, I guess you can say, disdain or contempt, but then at the same time, it's supposed to be an expression of apathy in a way. Because when you just see a heaping pile of shit, I guess, who cares? It's just crap and it's awful. So why give it the time of day? I feel like I experience life and I'm draining and I'm wasting away. I think that is definitely true. But then I guess maybe even as a form of protection, I'm just saying, who the fuck cares? And yet it's so bitter, yet it's so apathetic. I'm glad I'm finally making this video now because I've never really thought to like I guess like place it in better words. I mean, it's what I've been thinking of, which is why I've been saying that like I really should have just made this like video already. But I was sitting in my apathy, even more. I mean, still disgusted and irritated as always, but still blank and empty nonetheless. And it got me connecting to the bigger picture, I guess, in terms of like what it means to be a cluster B, in general. Um, we're pretty much the dramatic cluster, basically, which is, in comparison to like other personality disorders like cluster A and cluster C. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I don't really know, admittedly, as much as, the cluster B section, because obviously I am a cluster B myself. But I think a lot of people talk about being like dramatic and erratic and all that kind of stuff typically when they're like contributing to stigma. So that's not what I'm trying to do. But in actuality, apathy and anger, I'm starting to think go hand in hand like more than people think. That's why when borderlines have an episode or when narcissists have like a collapse, so to speak, narcissistic collapse, narcissistic rage, like whatever it is, the lingo that is supposed to be like appropriate here. Basically, let's just say like an overt emotional display, we just drain ourselves out because I can speak from my own experience. And I don't know if any of you cluster Bs are also watching this. I think you would like, quite frankly, like relate to it as well. I think the expression of the rage and frustration is just a way to remove the feelings and, you know, create this sense where it's like, okay, I expressed my feelings and they're like, away and stuff like that. And now I'm just quote unquote zen in my nothingness when in actuality I'm not, because the same thing is basically just going to keep like repeating as a cycle over and over again, like repeatedly. And I think this is why people are so confused by us when, I don't know, they think of like a narcissist or like a borderline where it's just like, oh, they just had that like complete freak out or some shit like that. They just went on like, such an episode of rage and then suddenly they just don't care. Because, I mean, I don't, maybe I'm more so speaking for myself personally. So, like, again, if you are a cluster B person, you can definitely like add your own input as well, like in my comments. But a lot of times I think what, like, when I express frustration, like, I'm just trying to get rid of like this pent up energy because truly it is, super irritating. And I think that's what's kind of ironic. And I'm really trying to like piece and like make sense of this, and it might not make sense to like anybody else because I think when a lot of people are around narcissists, borderlines, maybe even like an antisocial, they might look at us and be like, how the fuck can you act that way, or how can you say those things, or quote unquote do these things that have so much like antisocial tendencies, let's say, or like destroy the vibe, or like destroy the mood. I think everybody feels better when they release a sense of like anger, right? But here's the thing. I feel like we feel so much anger and frustration all the time. There's so much of this anger that constantly needs to be like released. And I think that's what a lot of people really don't understand about having a cluster B disorder, where there's just like, so much internal like rage, insecurity, and just like, frustration and stuff like that. Like we truly cannot emotionally regulate, or we live our lives basically trying to I guess like calm down, but we can never truly sort of just like feel calm. So I think like if you're ever around me and let's say like I'm talking some like negative shit and it's like, oh, you purposefully decide to be like miserable. Because I think like we've probably all heard it. Let's just say if you're a pessimistic person, let's just say if you're like a cluster B sort of like person, a lot of people might think that like we self sabotage. And I'm just like, we definitely do self sabotage. Like, I'm never gonna like deny that. But I think like what really makes this a struggle as like a mental illness, so to speak, is that like this irritation, this like empty void of like anger just like never goes away. And yeah, I know all of the things that like people say where they're just like, oh, getting revenge won't make you like feel better, I guess. But I mean, that's what it feels like, I think, to be like a cluster B person, because like you always just feel wronged, or you always just see yourself and you're thinking to yourself like, well, what the hell is wrong with you? Like I'm looking at myself right now and I'm just like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like why are you like this? So why is the world like this? Why is, everything like this? Like why does it have to be like this? All this like, rage and torment and, like unsatisfaction in the world, filled with people that say that are happy, that are truly just like blissful, ignorant, like morons and stuff like that. But if you get rid of all the anger and you're truly just like empty and emotionless in a lot of states, despite being, you know, despite having a high proclivity for like emotional tantrums and freakouts, honestly, as a cluster B sort of like individual, it just, yeah, it's this regurgitated, like cycle that just like never stops and it never goes away. And I don't know if I'll ever reach a point in my life where I have like any sense of peace. Like I think like my entire life, like I've always just like longed for that, like some like sense of peace, some sense of like, um, I don't know, where I guess I'm just like not filled with like personal hate or reacting to hate, because I'm so let down by everything and anything. Like as a narcissist, I feel like I'm too good for the world. I'm too good for this world. Like why do I deserve this? Why do I deserve to like exist in this fucking like, yeah, kind of like what I said in the beginning, like abomination of like an existence. But then again, like, you know, it is what it is. So who cares? I see so many memes. I see so many like mental like mental breakdown memes, or like mental health sort of like memes sometimes on like Instagram or like whatever. And yeah, I think they're funny, but I'm just like, having to like actually experience that all the time is like fucking hell. I mean, I still laugh at them where it's just like, I don't know, like there's typically a meme where it's just like me after I freak out, or some shit like that. Like I think you know the meme that I'm talking about, and the basis is basically like, oh yeah, after some sort of like dramatic episode, like, oh yeah, I'm fine. It's not that like big of a deal. But like I truly wish that it just didn't have to be a big deal to me. And I still think that's true. It genuinely doesn't even feel like a big deal to me. But then like you just sit in this like emptiness or something. And I guess like if you have such like poor connection with like your emotions and like stuff like that, then of course the most like in your face emotion, or the most like the strongest emotion will just like inevitably come out. And it's going to be this like burst of anger, I guess, or this like irritation or this frustration. It's just like, yeah, like I feel like as a cluster B, or like me as a narcissist personally, like it's just this constant loop of anger, nothingness, because with no balance, I guess, of like emotions and like sort of like proper sort of like regulation. Yeah, apathy and anger have such a strong connection to each other, because I guess I sort of see it as some sort of like, yeah, like yin yang. There can only be so much peace before anger can take the reins, so to speak. And then, yeah, after I'm done, after I shit on the world, shit on myself, whatever, like I just don't feel anything towards it. And people are always talking about like improving emotional intelligence, blah, 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 whatever that means. Like, I just don't get it, because I'm just like, I'm just trying to expel feelings that I don't want to experience, because genuinely in my life, the only ones that I've ever known properly are just like dissatisfaction, frustration, and annoyance because happiness seems like it will and only ever will be a distraction, and it never seems like that can ever actually be like genuine. And people think what they're gonna like what they regret perhaps like on their deathbed, but I think like I live every single day, and that's why I think like I already feel so much emptiness, I already feel so much apathy, despite that being a catalyst for anger, that I just feel nothing. And if I do, I feel regret every single day. So people say be grateful for another day, let's say, but another day for me just feels like another opportunity to die, at least in the personal sense, at least like in like the emotional sense. Yeah, every single day is also true that we're getting closer and closer to that at which like we die. But it's like I just don't have the object constancy to, I guess, just like feel grateful for something because I just can't attach to, anything. And everybody understands, or at least believes that, like, pain is unnecessary. Like, I'm not going to go on the whole, like, no pain, no gain, like, sort of thing. But at least, like, if you're a cluster B person and there's so much, like, internal pain, or let's just say, like, you struggle with some kind of like mental illness, like if it's just like an internal pain, everything just feels unnecessary. Like I see the so-called wisdom. People will be like, "Oh, you can't get to the good without like experiencing the bad." And I think like, yeah, maybe that's true to a certain extent if like we're taking it from like a dualist sort of like perspective. But how is that supposed to help me if like I just feel pain constantly, if not nothing? So, yeah, everything just feels so unnecessary. It just feels so hard to, care about anything. And people act like it's so easy, to be honest. And like, this is what I've noticed. So I guess like have dreams, have goals, and like have desires. I'm just trying, like anything that I do, I'm just doing it so that it can stop bothering me. I, I genuinely don't know if I can actually experience like true passion for like anything because it's like since the day I was born, if I'm not distracted in a false hedonistic sense of like happiness, everything just nags me. Whether it's having to go to school, having to go to work, my family, my friends, even, or just like people, or the voice in my own head, even. And I have ADHD, so it's fucking hell. I wish I didn't have to like entertain and contemplate like a lot of these thoughts that point out to me just how like terrible and like stupid this world is. So there's a battle between the constant anger and the fucking constant state of like apathy underneath it or above it, whatever it is the actual proper like leveling in terms of like how this is, actually compartmentalized in my like mental processing. But yeah. So with I do truly think, at least for me, that like yeah, like with a lot of apathy just comes a lot of fucking like irritation, but then apathy wins, but then the anger wins, but then apathy wins, and it's just like it's fucked, to be honest, having to experience your life that way. Like for me personally, when I tell you and I describe it to you, like yeah, I hate existing this way. But yeah, those are some words.